Hello and welcome. You're watching We Mean Business. It's been a tough last few months for all of us here in India. Inflation is making a big hole in our pockets. Food price inflation has been hurting, and despite all the assurances from the policymakers, inflation continues to be doggedly high. What's been masked in the inflation numbers, masked in a certain way, is that the country has also had the highest ever food grain production during the last crop year that ended in June. Despite the highest ever food grain output, the price of grains that come on your plate every day, refuses to show a downward trend. Today on We Mean Business, we talk about just what is going wrong and why are the masses, people like you and I, having to pay high prices for food. My guest today to discuss the issue, Keshav Rao from the Congress Party, Nalin Kohli from the BJP, Harish Damodaran of Hindu Business Line, he's a journalist of course, Devender Sharma and Dr. Ashok Gulati of the Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us and taking the time out to discuss something that involves and matters to each and every one of us. My first question to you, Dr. Gulati, is what has gone wrong despite these bumper crops that we see for this year with the kind of output that we've had? Why are we in the country having to pay such high prices for our food grains?
Well, you have to distinguish food inflation into two components. One, what relates to the cereal group particularly, and the other which is relating to vegetables, fruits, milk and milk products. You have a bumper harvest of grains, 257 million tons. The inflation there, particularly of cereals, is the lowest component contributing to food inflation. The largest component in food inflation is of vegetables, of milk and milk products, meat and other things. So we have to be clear where the pressures are, because the solutions of the two are different. One is a question of weak supply chains from potatoes to meat sector and milk sector, and the other is the grain, and there is enough grain in the kitty for the government. Those prices are stable, can be controlled despite the drought, but the other prices which are not within the government control, unless you improve upon and building the supply lines which are much more efficient, better connected to the retailers or processors in the country, there is no escape from that.
Get your point, Dr. Gulati. Let me ask Mr. Rao this. Mr. Rao, we've heard from the former finance minister, as every month we've had inflation, and earlier we used to have our weekly inflation numbers, the worries that he would talk about, and he also mentioned in the past about the supply side pressures and the steps that the government would take to ensure that that was addressed. Clearly, that seems to have not taken place, that has not been addressed well enough, because prices continue to be high despite and because of the supply side pressures.
Well, look, Mr. Gulati was very right. Let us not really mix up those issues now. Let us not bring the inflation onto the plate only because we are talking about the prices. Now, as Gulati says, even in the food grains, to the paradox today is, which you think paradox, which I don't think paradox at all, because the classroom teaching is different from what exactly is the reality and the ground reality. The question is today, even in the food grain inflation, the brunt, at least more than 60% is taken, as far as the price rise is concerned, taken by the vegetables, on which we really don't have control unless we go for cold storages. We really straighten the supply line and build them up. The one part. Second part is, as far as the grains, today we have a lot of stocks, but that is not an answer to it. What we need today is, we have a bumper crop, but not to speak because there is a supply, but the supply line is not correct. But the cost of productions, the minimum support price and the cost of inputs and cost of production must also include the land and the water level factors which have not been factored in. These kind of things are cropping up with the new modern farmer who thinks that prices must be much more than what he is expecting. So yes, then there is also the international situation today. Today US has a dry spell, Canada has a dry spell. Canada doesn't have, at least it did not harvest much. South America has a dry spell, Russia has a dry spell, Even in China, their production is so high, the bumper crop is there, but the prices are rising. So this has also in a global economy has impacted our prices. So we need to understand that. But why we are not complicit? We look complicit is we are not complicit because we are liberalizing even the exports because we are unmindful of the weak monsoons that perhaps lies ahead or better monsoons or equal monsoons. This is because we have a lot of stocks. We have sufficient supplies. But when you talk about prices of the such and such stocks, what we need is government to step in. If government can step in and correct its PDS, public distribution system, or distribution system, I think we are in safe zone. So we need not really worry. But it's
Mr. Rao, I'd like to interrupt here. Mr. Rao, I'd like to make a small point here. Some of the steps, Mr. Rao, allow me to interrupt here. Some of the steps that the government could have taken, I'll just give you one example. The warehouse facilities that had to be developed, and the target was, if I remember the numbers, or if I have taken note of the numbers correctly, we were supposed to have improved 19 million tons of additional storage capacity was to have been created by 2013. Till January 2012, we've created about 500,000 tons. Mr. Kohli, do you think that the government has failed and failed miserably in its effort?
Well, I think yes, because this was a figure that I was hoping to quote myself. So thank you, Ashutosh, for bringing it in. Let's, I think, look at the entire picture a little holistically. Number one is this government has not been able to look at the inflation of food grain or food inflation in particular, and the RBI figures are clear. If you look at only the period from September 2008 up to say October 2011, that's 3 years, every month food inflation has been over 10%. And if you look at it further, the vegetables component, as you know, early in the program we heard, that component has been close to 17, sometimes 20% as high. Now look at the irony. A few months ago, potatoes were being thrown on the street for vehicles to drive over because there was no fair price. And today potatoes are 10 times the rate what it was 4 months ago. Now let's look at the next picture. Is when we are looking at food grain production in the last decade, and of which about 8 years we've had the Congress-led UPA government, your food production in cereals has gone up by 20%, almost to 257 million tons, as just now your panelists pointed out. And at the same time, you have a storage capacity of only 62 or 63 million tons. A target of 20 million would have brought it to about 82 million tons. Now this year it is expected anywhere between as little as 10 million tons and as much as 20 million tons of food grains is going to be stored out in the open. Now when it's stored out, and out of the 63 million tons, we are not sure how much is already covered and kept in places. That's not fully safe in that sense.
Get your point, completely get your point. Let's just go across to Harish Damodaran. Harish, as you look at these numbers, and when you look at it from, when you just step out and look at the numbers, have we done enough in terms of taking care of some of the supply side worries that could actually improve the situation, improve availability in the market?
To be fair to this government, I think I would say that in the last 6-7 years, there's been some kind of a production rebound. You check any crop, you see wheat, you see soybean, you see pulses, even pulses for that matter. You know, something like 18 million tons which we are doing, and same thing whether it is milk, whether it is potatoes, like for example, we are now doing something like 40 million tons of potato. So it's not true that there's been no supply side response. There has obviously been a supply side response to the prices. So when prices are good, and what has happened, basically what this government has done is basically it's got the prices right. You know, so and this is a point which I think Dr. Gulati keeps stressing. You know, now you need to get the markets also right. So as far as production is concerned, I think there has been some turnaround, definitely much better than what it used to be in the, say, early 2000s or the late 90s. And there is definitely more money which the farmer is today making. So the challenge really is now, I think, in the costs. The costs are shooting up now because fertilizer prices have really shot through the roof, especially non-urea prices and labor. So obviously some of these costs are going to be passed on. I mean, so the rest, I mean, beyond a point, I don't think you can blame the government for this. Yes, you can say that between, say, the farm and the whatever consumers, you need much faster moving assembly lines, which will take the produce directly from the field to the consumers. But otherwise, if you see by any measure, you look at for example sales of tractors. Today, I think annual sales of tractors is about 5 lakh tractors, whereas it used to be hardly some 2 lakh, till early 2000s. So definitely there has been a turnaround as far as production is concerned. But yes, the marketing, the distribution, these things definitely have not improved the way it has happened. And the other aspect is, see, food still accounts for about 30% of average private expenditure, and in the case of in the case of poor people, it will be 50% or higher. And unlike other commodities, it's difficult for food the consumption to come down. So which is why for even if your production falls a little by 10%, there is a tendency for prices to go up by 100%. So
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for retina display. Full screen view. Faster response time. And Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.